All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the OneClass channel. My name is Osehi. I am one of the senior economics tutors, and today I will be going over a couple of questions that were asked at the high school and early college university level. A little bit of background about myself is I have a bachelor's degree in economics, and I currently work as an analyst as one of the big five banks. So if you're having problems with economics or you need some help with economics questions, I encourage you to look at the link in the bio below and we should be able to help you. So with that said, let's get started. So question number one. Briefly discuss the concept of M1 money supply. Why does it have limitations to the full definition of money? Explanation. M1 consists of the checking accounts, the demand deposits, and negotiable order of withdrawal accounts at this. Let's start that over. M1 consists of checking accounts, demand deposits, and negotiable order of withdrawal accounts. All forms are of liquid form of money, not the hard cash. This is the form of money that can be instantly converted to cash. This is not a solid form of hard cash, but from that form you can convert the cash as you required in no time. So this does not fulfill most required definition of money, hence it is not full money. So this answer is partly correct. Basically, M1 equals, like he said, or like he or she said, checking accounts, demand deposits, negotiable order of withdrawal accounts. So M1 includes all this, but it also includes M0, which is the hard cash coin. So we'll just change that. M0 also includes hard cash, coins, and all the other most liquid forms of money. Now the reason this has limitations to the full definition of money, because money isn't just liquid. These are the most liquid forms of money, but once we get into things like credit and investments and T-bills, then those are other non-liquid forms of money. They can't be turned into hard cash immediately, but they still are classified as money. So say this answer is not completely correct, but for the most part, they're on the right track. So Okay, so solution's incorrect. All right. Question number 2. Define time inconsistency. Explain how it can explain the credibility problem of monetary policy. The term time inconsistency is an aspect of behavioral economics. Sorry, just checking this. Okay. The term time inconsistency is an aspect of behavioral economics. It is defined as change in decision makers' preference or priorities with respect to time. Thus, his decision may vary with respect to time. Now let's take an example of the Federal Reserve. Suppose the long-term aim of the Federal Reserve is to moderately adjust the inflation in the market and to check the level of unemployment. So the Federal Reserve, in order to decrease the rate of inflation, adopt a contractionary monetary policy with respect to time, all the money will be collected out of the economy by the Federal Reserve. But as soon as the unemployment level starts rising, so in order to increase the employment level, Federal Reserve again start adopting expansionary monetary policy, as seen in the Phillips curve, that the rate of inflation is inversely proportional to unemployment. As a result, this decision is not consistent with time, so it creates issues of credibility. Yeah, this is a pretty good explanation. Basically saying that in terms of monetary policy, inflation is inversely proportional with unemployment, and it creates some inconsistency in your data because there's times where unemployment level is higher and lower, and that is how basically the inflationary policies are adapted. So it would say correct. Great explanation. Okay, this is question 3. Provide one example of each of the following and explain your identification in terms of elasticity. So, normal good, inferior good, substitute good, complementary good, price inelastic good, which is demand, price elastic good, again in terms of demand, price inelastic good in terms of supply, price elastic good in terms of supply. Normal good is any good in which demand of consumers increase when income increases. So normal equals demand goes up when income goes up. And an example was organic pasta, whole wheat, etc. So that's a good example because organic and usually the healthier foods are a little more expensive. And once you see that you have a rise in income, you would, if you're someone that treats health as a really valuable thing, you might spend more on the more expensive goods that are more better for you in terms of your hygiene. So organic pasta, organic foods in general is actually a perfect example of this. If you have the money to do it, then you would buy it. But if not, if your income hasn't increased to the level at which you would buy it, then you might just stick to regular types of food. Next is inferior good. Inferior good is any good for which quantity demanded increases when consumer income rises. Inferior good is any good for which quantity demanded decreases when consumer goods rises. For example, if income is low, it would make sense to take the bus instead of a car. Okay, so I see what they're saying here. So inferior good is demand decreases when income rises. And the example here is with the bus. If you have no difference between taking the bus or driving, when your income goes up, you might switch from being someone that takes the bus because it's a cheaper alternative to someone that actually drives, because when you're taking the bus, you're saving money on gas. You might not even own a car. But if your income rises, you might decide that taking the bus is an inferior good when you could be driving to work, driving to the grocery store, driving to wherever you need to go. This is another perfect example. Next is substitute good. A substitute good, in contrast, is a good with positive cross elasticity of demand. The demand for substitute goods is increased when price of another good is also increased. Okay, so substitute equals demand for good A increases when price, okay, just note that is P, price for good A decreases or increases, sorry. For group B, for a good B. So let's just say that again. Demand for good A increases when price for good B increases. So these two goods would be substitutes. And basically there's not too much of a difference between these goods, so there would be substitutes. An example here is Coke and Pepsi. I don't know if any of you know the difference between Coke and Pepsi. I personally do, but for the majority of people, I feel like there's not much of a difference between Coke and Pepsi. So if Coke was good A and Pepsi was good B, if the price of Pepsi rose, then people might decide to be a Coke drinker, and vice versa. Same thing with tea and coffee. If price for coffee increased, some people might switch to tea instead of drinking coffee in their mornings. So that's the first three. Let's get this out of the way so we could look at complementary goods and the rest. So next is complementary good. Complementary goods demand is increased when price of another good is decreased. The demand for good is also reduced when price of another good is increased. For example, car and gas, shoes and polish. And okay, so This is basically price. I keep on writing price. Price for good A decreases, then demand for good B increases. Excuse me. And this is just because the goods complement each other. So for example, milk and cereal. If the price for cereal goes down, then most people eat their cereal with milk, so they'll also be inclined to purchase milk also because the price of cereal has gone down. However, if the price of cereal goes up, then if you're not going to buy the cereal, you're probably not going to buy the milk if your sole purpose for using milk is for cereal. So that would be how those two goods complement each other. So next is price inelastic good for demand. Price inelastic good is also referred to as a non-sensitive good price. The quantity of the goods demanded is unaffected when the price of the good changes. For example, gasoline. Even if the price increases, its demand does not decrease. It's another perfect example. So, price inelastic good. So, QD unaffected by change in price. And gasoline is a good example here because whether the price of gas goes up or goes down, there's still a lot of drivers on the road. So to drive, you need gas in your car. Even if you're taking the bus, the TTC, I think the TTC requires some sort of gas. Or public transportation, it requires some sort of gas. So, because there's always cars on the road, there's always people buying gas. It doesn't matter if the price goes up or goes down, people are always going to be buying gas. Now, gas might not be completely inelastic because if gas prices go up, people can just use the bus and that's less gas being consumed. But the elasticity, gas is relatively inelastic because there's so many cars on the road and demand doesn't really change by too much. So let's do, running out of space here, or we can clear all. Let's do price elastic good. So that was price inelastic good with respect to demand. We'll look at in respect to supply shortly. Price elastic good, this is again in respect to demand. Price elasticity of demand for a good is also referred to as price sensitivity. For example, television, cosmetics, etc. So basically, demand changes significantly as price changes. maybe significantly isn't the right word there. Demand changes. Say demand changes are greater than price changes. So when it's basically measuring demand changes in respect to a change in price, and a 1 unit change in price would cause demand to change by more than 1 unit, maybe 2, maybe 3, who knows. But television is a perfect example for this. If a TV costs $2,000, your demand would definitely be lower if that same TV were to cost $3,000 the next day. It would be significantly lower. So, because there's so many different options for TVs, and this also ties to substitute goods. There's just not one TV. There's different types of TVs, and if the price of one goes up, you might just go ahead and buy a different one. So that demand for that one TV will change because there's more options in the market. And then next we have price inelastic good, and this is for supply. Price inelastic good, price inelastic supply is if there's a change in price, there's a lower percentage change in supply. So all that means is the percent change in supply versus the percent change in price equals, or would be less than 1, because the change in supply is going to be greater than the change in price. And finally, the last one is price elastic goods, which is also supply. So that's price elastic supply. Again, this is just percentage change in price elastic goods. The price elasticity of demand change in the quantity of goods and service required when the price changes. It's not the perfect definition, but we'll say price elasticity of supply. Change in supply over change in price is greater than 1. So the change in supply is higher than the change in price. So all in all, these were good explanations. Okay. Next, we have a series of questions, and it's asking if they're private good, club goods, public goods, and common goods, common resources. So, the first one asks, open heart surgery is best characterized as a private good, a club good, a common resource or a public good. See what our tutor said. Open heart surgery, as it is both excludable if you do not pay for the surgery, and the hospital can deny you. And it's rival because you have to wait for one person to be operated on at a time, assuming there's just one surgeon. Then open heart surgery could be the side could be a public good. So 11. Well, let's go through the definitions first. So public good equals non-rival and non-excludable. Private good is rival and excludable. Common resource, I believe this is it excludable and non-rival? Let's just check the definition real quick. The resource, do definition of club good. So they're excludable but non-rival. So if club goods are excludable, then and non-rival, common resources are non-excludable. And rival and club goods are rival or they're non-rival and excludable. So open heart surgery, again, if it's just one surgeon in the hospital, it is a private good. However, if there's multiple surgeons, then we'll just say it's a private good. Open heart surgery is a private good. So A, that's correct. Central Park, New York, when it's nearly empty, is characterized as what? And our tutor said, Central Park, when it's nearly empty, is a public good because it is impossible to exclude anyone from entering the park. And since it's empty, additional people do not decrease enjoyment. So that is correct. We would say it is a public good. Central Park, when it's crowded, however, is a private good, club good, common resource, or public good. And it's a common resource because it's not excludable. Anyone can really enter the park, but once it becomes crowded, it becomes rival because there's not a space to fit everyone in the world. The park has a certain capacity. Number 14, cable television is best described as, it's 14. It's a club good as it is not as it is excludable but non-rivalrous. As if you do not pay for the service, you can be excluded. So yeah, if you don't have a TV, if you don't pay for your TV, it can be excluded. However, many people are using cable television. You can exclude, but you can be excluded if you don't pay for it. But how many people are using cable television does not alter the utility of the other people, and it's not rival because just because you're using it doesn't mean someone else can't use it. So cable television would be a club good. Farm raised salmon are best described as, it's probably a private good. It's a private good because it's your own farm. So yeah, you could stop people from purchasing it if they don't have, I mean, your consumption of it is rivaled with other people's because it's on a farm. There's people that don't have access to get into that farm, so it'll be a rival, and you consuming it decreases the enjoyment of others. And it is also excludable because unless you decide to sell, then really, unless you decide to sell, then you could actually stop people from consuming it. And finally, the Chinese language is best characterized as a private good, a club good, common resource, or a public good. You'll probably say this is a public good. Think anyone can learn Chinese, or yeah, anyone can learn Chinese. You just have to put in the time to learn it, and you speaking Chinese doesn't really stop someone else from speaking Chinese, so it's not really rival. So that's that. I think you gave an answer for the last one, but we'll say the Chinese language is a public good. Correct. Great explanation. Okay, so we have a series of questions here. So the marginal product of labor is A, the demand for labor, B, the payment made to workers for their contributions to the output they produce, C, the change in the firm's revenue as a result of hiring one or more worker, D, the additional output a firm produces as a result of hiring more worker. So let's see what a tutor said. The marginal product of labor is something that every unit of productivity of labor generates per addition. So do believe that is correct. And when you're looking at the word marginal, you're just looking at the change after you add something. So that takes away option A and takes away option B. And in this sense, we're left with C and D. So the product of labor is the output, and the additional output is what really determines the effects of adding one more worker. So here, the additional output of adding one more worker should be the definition of marginal product of labor. Number 2, what does the phrase internalizing an external cost mean? A, limiting the extent to which domestic firms can outsource production. B, prohibiting economic activities that create externalities. C, finding a way to address cross-border pollution. D, forcing producers to factor into their production cost the cost of externalities created in the production of their output. And again, it's D, forcing producers to factor in production costs. The cost of externalities created in the production of their output is nothing but costing the producer for the negative things like pollution. And that's a perfect explanation over here. And internalizing external costs, so basically costs that could affect the outside of, let's say there's a factory and the factory emits some sort of pollution, then you have to find a way to internalize those costs in terms of how you will take care of the negative externality. And the best definition for that is forcing producers to factor in their production cost into their production cost, the cost of externalities. So the cost that negative externalities might have out in the world, you're forcing producers to actually pay for those costs. So the correct answer there is D. Number 3, the highest valued alternative that must be given up to engage in activity is the definition of A, implicit cost, B, opportunity cost, C, utility, D, economic sacrifice. Should be C, opportunity cost. And let's just go over that again. I think they mean B, opportunity cost, but highest value alternative that must be given up to engage in an activity. So yeah, the term for this is opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is the alternative action you forego. Should be an E at the end there. The alternative action you forego to engage in a different activity. So we'll say B is opportunity cost. What is market failure? A, it refers to the inability of a market to allocate resources efficiently up to the point when marginal social benefit equals marginal private cost. B, it refers to the situation where an entire sector of the economy collapses because of some unforeseen event. C, it refers to the breakdown of the market economy because of widespread corruption in the government. D, it refers to the inability of the market to allocate its resources efficiently up to the point where marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost. So let's see what our tutor said. B, market failure is nothing but economic collapse where demand falls due to some event. And that is true. First, a situation where the entire economy collapses because of some unforeseen event. So there's no way you could have predicted market failure. There's no way you could predict the economy crashing or the failure of an economy because of some unforeseen event. So let's try to eliminate the other options. Refers to the inability of the market to allocate its resources efficiently up to the point where marginal social benefit equals marginal private cost. D refers to the inability of the market to allocate resources efficiently to the point where marginal social benefit equals marginal private cost. C refers to a breakdown of the market economy because of widespread corruption into government. So all these are all events that you could have seen ahead. If you created different economics models, you could have seen that the market would be unable to allocate its resources efficiently to the point where marginal social benefit equals marginal social cost. You would have seen it here also to the point where marginal social benefit equals marginal private cost. And the breakdown of market economy because of widespread corruption in the government. Again, corruption doesn't just happen. You should be able to foresee that also. But for an unseen event, for example, the airline industry in this case, that is true market failure. And like our tutor said here, demand just falls due to some unforeseen event. So let's look at question 5 now. Suppose a competitive firm is paying a wage of $12 an hour and sells its product at $3 per unit. Assume the labor is the only input. If the last worker hired increases output by 3 units per hour, then to maximize profits, the firm should A. lay off some workers, B. not change the number of workers it currently hires, C. hire additional workers, D. there's no information for this question. Suppose a competitive firm is paying a wage of $12 an hour and it sells its products at 3 per unit. Okay. Suppose labor is the only input. If the last worker hired increases output by 3 units per hour, then the mark. So if the company sells its products for $3 per unit, and the last worker hired, first of all, the worker's wage are $12 an hour. Wow. That's just $12 an hour. And last worker hire increases output by 3 units per hour. Output equals 3 units per hour. That means they're basically charging their wage is basically their wage for that additional worker, which is 12 an hour, is greater than the output of that additional worker, which is 3 times 3 equals 9. So they're basically generating $9 an hour in revenue, and their cost, which is wages in this case, is $12 an hour for the worker. So not changing the number of workers is definitely not wrong. Hire additional workers, it's definitely wrong. Hire additional workers, definitely wrong. We do have enough information to answer this question, and A would probably be the most sound answer, because for you to make a profit, you can't be generating income less than what your costs are. And in this case, the cost of the wage, your income is revenue. So $9 an hour. So see what was said here. Last worker hired increases production by 3 units per hour. Market price is 3, so $9 per hour is what the company is making. Go ahead and fire. Yeah. Question number 6. When the price of summer tank tops falls, you buy more of them because they're relatively less expensive. This is called A, the deadweight loss effect, B, the income effect, C, the substitution effect, D, the elasticity effect. And 6 is D, the elasticity effect. Elasticity is if price drops, demand increases. If price increases, demand drops. It's not necessarily the definition of elasticity, but I do agree that this is D, the elasticity effect. I'm just saying that the demand for summer tank tops is greater than the change in price. So in this case, change in demand, change in price would be greater than 1, because as price falls, you are consuming more tank tops than you were before because they're relatively less expensive. So this would be the elasticity effect. So, do you agree with that? Question 7. An externality is a benefit realized by the purchaser of a good or service. B, a benefit or cost experienced by someone who is not a producer or a consumer of the good or service. C, a cost paid by the producer of a good or service. D, anything that is external and or not relevant to the production of the good or service. So, first of all, externalities can be positive or negative. If it's positive, it's going to create a benefit. If it's negative, it's going to create a cost. And the key word is external here. So it means it affects someone who is not a producer or consumer of the good. So here, a benefit realized by a purchaser of a good or service, that doesn't fit any of our definitions because it could be a benefit or a cost, and it's supposed to be realized by someone who is not a producer or consumer of the good or service. B, a benefit or cost experienced by someone who is not a producer or consumer of the good or service. That's exactly what we're looking for. C, a cost paid by the producer of the good or service. Could be, but that's not the full definition of externality. And D, anything that is external or not relevant to the production of the good or service. That is not true because it's relevant to the good or service, to the production of the good or service, but it just affects people who are not consumers or producers of it. So let's see what our tutor said. And they said B, externalities can be positive or negative. Something like pollution affects local population even if they do not use the product from the factory. So we agree with that. Question number 8. Firms pay famous individuals to endorse their product because A, apparently demand is affected not just by the number of people who use the product, but also by the type of person who uses the product. B, famous people only consume high quality products. C, famous people obviously know what are best goods and services. D, the firms are irrational or are wasting advertising expenditures. Let's see what our tutor said here. Endorsement. Endorsement is supporting the product. Famous people support the product. Population will think the product is good. And that is correct. So this is just a firm using advertising to increase demand. It's a form of advertising, and advertising does increase demand because that's how you spread out the word. That's how other people find out about your product. And one of the best forms of advertising is actually using a famous person because they have a fan base, and you're basically reaching out to that target group that likes that famous person and exposing them to your product. So famous people only consume high quality product. That's not true. Famous people obviously know what's the best goods and services are. They don't. Not sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but they do have some sort of pull in terms of increasing demand because it's good advertising. And D, the firms are irrational and are wasting advertising expenditures. That's not true. So our option here, apparently demand is affected not just by the number of people who use the product, but also by the type of person that uses the product. That would be your correct answer right there. Number 9, if a consumer If a consumer receives 20 units of utility from consuming 2 candy bars and 25 units of utility from consuming 3 candy bars, the marginal utility of the second candy bar is A, 25 units, B, 20 units, C, 5 utility units, D, unknown, as more information is needed to determine this answer. And 9 is D, as I expected. If they said the second candy bar, then some information could be there. They said 2 candy bars, so cannot know the answer by this data. Basically, we'll just need the utility of the first candy bar to know the marginal utility of the second candy bar. If this question asks us the marginal utility of the third candy bar, it would simply just be 25 minus 20, and the additional utility of the third candy bar would just be the difference, which is 5. But since they're asking about the second candy bar, we would need to know what the first candy bar is. So marginal utility equals UN minus UN minus 1. And in this case, we'll just solve for the marginal. We'll solve for the marginal utility of 3 candy bars, which would be U3 minus U2 equals 5, because 25 minus 20 equals 5. That's if we're solving for U3. But if since we don't have the utility of 1 candy bar, we can't really solve for the marginal utility of the second candy bar. So our answer is D here. We don't have enough information. But the answer would be C if we were asking for the marginal utility of the third candy bar. Clear all. And the last question here is, when there's a negative externality, the private cost of production blank, the social cost of production. A is lesser than, B is greater than, C eliminates, D equal to. See what our tutor said? It's less than. Some externalities are huge. They cause more harm to the population than good. when there's negative externality, the private cost of production is less than the social cost of production. Yeah, so because they do cost more harm, the negative externality is costing more harm than good. The social costs are actually going to be greater than the private costs. So in this case, private costs would be less than the social cost. If it was a positive externality, the private cost would be greater than social cost. And yeah, so this answer here is A, and we agree with that. So let's say correct. Great explanations. So next question here. What components of GDP, if any, would each of the following transactions affect? How would each transaction affect GDP? So first of all, we know GDP is equal to consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports, where net exports equals exports minus imports. So, family buys a new refrigerator. See what our tutor said. Purchase of a new refrigerator will lead in an increase in the GDP consumption component. Thus, the GDP will increase by the amount the refrigerator is purchased. And that is correct because a refrigerator is a final good. So consumption does go up by exactly the amount that the refrigerator is bought for. Aunt Jane buys a new house. Buying a new house may be considered as an investment, as it has future prospects too, and it is an addition of a new value to the economy. So it depends on how you value buying a house. In this case, we're valuing it as an investment. So the investment component here would go up because it does have future value. And again, this is increase in GDP. So A equals C goes up, or so like we said, buying a new refrigerator, C goes up. B, I goes up. Let's see, C. Ford sells a Mustang from its inventory. And a Mustang being sold will be included in GDP in the component of change in inventories. That should be part of the investment of GDP. So, yeah, I agree with that. Investment is going up. If they're selling a piece of their inventory, you buy a pizza. Should be the consumption component. Pizza is a final good. Buying it increases the GDP by exactly the amount that you buy it. California paves Highway 101. So here should be government expenditure. So this is paid for through taxes and subsidies, but basically government expenditure is going up because the government is paying for this highway. You buy a bottle of French wine. So I'm assuming we're not in France. So this would actually decrease GDP because it's decreasing net exports. The tutor says here buying French wine would be considered as an import, and thus it would reduce GDP by the amount of imports. So it reduces exports because only imports are being affected here. If imports goes up, overall net exports reduces. G. Honda expands its factory in Maryville, Ohio. Expansion of factory is an investment by Honda, thus it includes GBP. So yeah, that is an investment. If you're expanding to different parts of the country, it's considered an investment, and it increased the investment portion because you're investing and it's gonna bring in more money in the future. It has future value, so that's why it's considered an investment and actually increasing GBP. So all these are correct. And I believe this is the last question I have for today. So it says there are two types of consumers for tickets to a team's game. Total cost. So the total cost equals 10 plus Q squared. Demand 1 equals Q equals 600 minus 3P. Demand 2 equals Q equals 600 minus 2P. If the team can price discriminate, what is the price and quantity for each customer? If the team cannot price discriminate, what is the price and quantity of tickets sold for the game? So demand 1 equals 600 minus 3P. So the inverse demand is P equals 200 minus 1 over 3Q. And that's just simply solving for P to get the inverse demand function. And the inverse demand for the second one would be P equals 300 minus 1 over 2Q. So total revenue would be price multiplied by quantity. So P times Q for demand 1 over here is 600P minus 3P squared. So that would be total revenue for 1. Call that TR1. And TR2 equals 600P minus 2P squared. So 600P Total revenue is price multiplied by quantity. So we found the price, or we did the inverse demand function just to get demand, and to solve for the total revenue, we just did 600p minus p squared, 600p minus 3p multiplied by p, and 600p minus 2p multiplied by p. And now we can get the marginal revenue. MR1 equals 600 minus, just see what our tutor's doing here before we just jump ahead. But if the team can price discriminate against the price, what is the price and quantity for each type of consumer? In that case, two prices are set. Marginal revenue 1 equals marginal cost, and marginal revenue 2 equals marginal cost. So they did the marginal revenue for 1 equals marginal cost. Marginal cost is just 2Q. And as we see over here, and the marginal revenue for price 1, for the demand 1, is 200 minus 2 over 3Q 1. So they have Q1 equals 75 tickets and Q2 equals 100 tickets. Price for 1 equals 200 minus 25, 175 tickets, and price for 2 equals 250 per ticket. So they did the inverse demand function. So they did this to find the price and the marginal revenue. The total revenue for 1 actually would be P multiplied by Q equals 200Q minus 1 over 3Q squared, which is taken from this line over here. And TR for 2 equals 300Q minus 1 over 3, or 1 over 2 Q squared. And from that we get the marginal revenue. So MR1 equals 200 minus 2 over 3Q. MR2 equals 300 minus Q. So that's how we get the marginal revenue functions. And just now that and it's basically just, you get them from the total revenue functions. And now that we have those, we could just write our marginal revenue for 1 here. And MR2 equals 300 minus Q. Now, in that case, we also know marginal cost equals 2Q. And now it's just simply equating marginal revenue 1 into marginal cost, and marginal revenue 2 equal into marginal cost. So MR1 equals MC equals 200 minus 2 over 3Q equals 2Q. Bring that over, you have 200. First of all, you can multiply everything by 3 to just remove the fractions. So we have 600 minus 2Q equals 6Q. 600 equals 8Q, and Q1 equals 600 divided by 8, which is 75 for Q1. And the price for Q1 would just simply be P equals 200 minus 1 over 3 Q, which is equal to 200 minus 25 equals 125. So, sorry, 175. So that's how we get the price for Q1, price for the ticket 1, and the quantity for ticket 1. And now if we were to do the same thing for the second demand curve, we just simply again equate MC equals 2Q. So MR2 equals MC, which is 300 minus Q equals 2Q. 3Q equals 300. Q equals 100. And you plug that in back into this price equation for demand 2, which is P equals 300 minus 0.5 Q, or 1 over 2Q, equals 300 minus 50 equals 250. So that's how we get 250. The second prize being charged is 250 for 100 tickets. So 250 per ticket for 100 tickets. And the first prize being charged is 175 per ticket for 75 tickets if we're price discriminating. And then question 2 is, if the team cannot price discriminate, what is the price and quantity of tickets sold for each game? The team cannot price discriminate, what is the price and quantity sold for each game? So you have to combine the demand curves. So Q1 plus Q2. So excuse me. Demand 1 plus demand 2, which is 600 minus 3P plus, we add it to 600 minus 2P, which is 1200 minus 5P. And that's our new demand curve when we combine them. So Q equals that. Now we get the inverse demand, which in this case is 240 minus 0.2Q. And we just get that by solving for P. And total revenue would be P times Q, which is 240 Q minus 0.2Q squared. And marginal revenue here would be 240 minus 0.4Q. So now that we have marginal revenue and we solved for marginal revenue, we clear all this right here. And basically equate MR equal to MC. We know MR equals to 240 minus 0.4Q. MC stays the same, which is just 2Q. And equate them, it's 240 minus 0.4Q equals 2Q. 2.4Q equals 240. Q equals 100. And if we plug that into our price equation, we get the price as well. 240 minus 0.2Q equals 240 minus 20 equals 220 per ticket. And so our optimal quantity would be 100 if there's no price discrimination, and the price per ticket would be 220. And that is all. Note this price will force consumers of demand function demand 1 Q equals 600p to leave the market because they can pay a maximum of 200 in this case. Therefore, the target demand is only demand 1. So this is a good addition right here, because from demand 1 we saw the optimal quantity was $175 per ticket, and it's if there's no price discrimination, then the new optimal price is 220. The individuals in demand 1 would exit the market, and that creates inefficiency. So the target demand actually in this scenario should only be demand 1, because it can meet the needs of both the customers in the first demand curve and the customers in the second demand curve. So if we put MR equal to MC, Q1 is 75 tickets like we solved up here, and the optimal price should be 175 tickets. If this price is charged in demand 2, we would get 325 tickets for also $175 per ticket. So this is correct. That's a great and thorough explanation. So I think that's it from me. So once again, thank you for taking the time out to just look at some of these questions with me, and hope I was a great deal of help. Looking forward to streaming again. And just remember, if you need help with questions, economic question in university level, high school level, please see the link in our bio and submit your questions, and we will find a way to help you. Thank you. Have a nice rest of your day.